Now that the entire first season of Star Trek Discovery is out and available for viewing, I guess it's time to answer the question, is Star Trek Discovery worth a watch? Hello Internet, Rick here with a spoiler-free review of Series 1. So Discovery's production was under scrutiny from day one, unveiling a fairly unpopular ship design and announcing that it would be another prequel series. It rubbed some people the wrong way. Then there was the announcement that it would take place in the Prime timeline continuity, which raised as many concerns as it placated. How far would they go to make it period specific? Does that even matter to you? Probably not unless you're a lore fiend, but on the other hand the old 60s aesthetic might be iconic, but it's hard to deny that it shows its age. Whatever decision Star Trek Discovery made on this front was going to upset someone. And not just on the design front, but the time period they've selected, 10 years before Kirk, places boundaries on the series, fence posting the series to meet certain events and technologies of the time already depicted in Star Trek lore. Discovery also faced the uphill battle of the strange decision to limit its viewership base in the US to those who purchased CBS All Access, and if this is the sole reason for not watching the series, then I can't say I blame you. But for every other country it is available on Netflix, which is a much more widely accessible platform. So I've been avoiding the question, haven't I? Is Discovery worth a watch? Well, yes. Yeah, it is. Does it have its problems? Yes. Yes, it does. Looking back on the series now it's over and giving it some space has allowed my manic Trekkie fanboy side to die down a bit. I was just overjoyed that there was a returning Trek series. And even if you're new to Star Trek, especially if you're new to Star Trek, then this series has you in mind, so let's delve into the review, shall we? Now, as said, if you're a fan of the latest Star Trek films, then you'll probably like Star Trek Discovery. It's set in the continuity of the main series though, meaning that the events that occur in the 2009 reboot films remain separate from this show. Aside from the occasional plot point or fan service nod to the Trek mythos, Discovery stands pretty well on its own as a separate Trek series. You won't have to watch 700 plus episodes of previous Trek to understand Discovery. However, if you're expecting another Trek series akin to The Next Generation or Voyager, or any other for that matter, you're in for a bit of a shock. Discovery is against the backdrop of the Federation Klingon War, a dark period in the Federation's history, and perhaps their sort of dark tone and more drama-fueled environment may be a gripping take on the Star Trek universe. But was it the right one to take for a series that needed to act as an icebreaker to reintroduce Trek to a wider audience? Perhaps not, but it certainly made a splash when it landed. This darker tone, not exactly as gritty as sci-fi like Battlestar Galactica, is more like a pervasive atmosphere around the show. Even a majority of the humour is of a darker, grim note, at least to begin with. It often clashes with the lighter ethos of Star Trek's hopeful future style message, but this is a deliberate choice that, over time, becomes apparent. As stated from the get-go, Discovery would be following the career of Micheal Burnham, played by Sonequa Martin Green of Walking Dead fame, a human orphan raised on Vulcan and assigned to the USS Shenzhou. Now, this fact is important in understanding her character, her upbringing. She is an emotional, compassionate creature raised in an environment of pure logic, and this creates a confusing personality to follow, especially in opening episodes. She seems, well, fundamentally quite unlikable and arrogant. This is on purpose, I suspect, and it opens her up for a greater development later on in the series. But again, I question the choice, and can completely understand why some people don't like her character. Note I say her character, not the acting, as when Martin Green is given leverage to emote, she does so justifiably well. It's just not often that Burnham's character gets a chance to really open up until much later on in the series. But don't worry. Despite the promise that Discovery would follow the story of Burnham exclusively, there are plenty of other characters to meet and learn about. However, this raises another issue, which we'll touch on in a minute. Jason Isaacs, Captain Lorca, is the militaristic, pragmatic captain of the USS Discovery, and despite being a very dark individual, literally thanks to his hypersensitivity to light, he is a joy to watch as he manipulates and schemes. This wartime setting here does the series a benefit, and allows the captains such as Lorca, an opportunity to flourish with his at any costs kind of mentality. Anthony Rapp's Paul Stamets provides an entertaining watch as a grumpy scientist whose lifelong work has been apprehended for the war effort. Said work becomes the major plot MacGuffin for the rest of the series, a technology to allow instantaneous travel across vast distances. People who know their lore of Trek will have the added benefit of watching to see how this technology will inevitably fail. As such, the advancement over conventional warp, it wouldn't be abandoned so easily, but it must be gone by Kirk's time. Doug Jones's Saru, to begin with, provides some of the drama for the series by brushing Michael Burnham the wrong way from the get-go. But there's a theme beginning to form here. Like Stamets' standoffish attitude to everyone around him, or Lorca's grim attitude to his own crew, Saru's personality is negative, literally being an individual with a constant innate fear built into him, and a frustration directed at Burnham. Even if it's a justifiable frustration, this, coupled with all the other characters, presents a crew that's very difficult to warm up to. They're not friends, they are colleagues, forced to work together, and you get the feeling that everyone on the ship probably doesn't hang around much in 10 forwards. The breath of fresh air is Cadet Tilly and Dr. Hugh Culber. The former, fresh out of the academy, is a boundless optimist, although not exactly naive, while Culber is a more experienced medical professional with a deep well of compassion. Now, these characters do develop as the series goes on, all of them, becoming more likeable over time as things happen to them, and the inclusion of new characters later on, such as Ash Tyler, played by Shazad Latif, and Admiral Cornwell, do more to diversify the cast. That initial hurdle is there, and deliberately so. The majority of people I know who have watched Discovery, Trek fans or not, stopped watching before they were past this hurdle, so perhaps the writers of Discovery made it a little too high? Another thing is that many of the other individuals we see on the bridge of the Discovery are there simply to push buttons and say yes sir. And this is a problem. Discovery's had a very short time to tell its ambitious tale, and as such, anyone not essential to the plot at hand is practically ignored. Chances are you won't even be able to name these characters by episode 5, because between them they've had about 2 lines despite being in every episode. Of course, the series 2 is bookended with layered Klingon encounters, not so much in the middle, but the thick rubber masks and the near total exclusive use of the Klingon language makes it difficult to see them as anything but the antagonists. Hell, because of the redesign, it even makes them difficult to identify as Klingons, but more on that later. L'Rell and Vok mark out the 2 Klingons we are supposed to be interested in, and yeah, I kind of was, but more what they were doing rather than their actual characters. I didn't find myself caring about them as much as I should, and often was left questioning their inclusion in the narrative altogether. The storyline itself was, as admitted, written backwards. Plot point Z is where we need the series to end, so how do we get there? The tale being told in Discovery is one of personal growth. Every character has changed from start to finish, some more profoundly than others, and by the end of the series we are left with the promise of a more optimistic future that Trek was known for. But the journey to get there is disjointed in places. A recurring problem is that from the get-go, characters perform actions because the plot demands it, often excluding their own motivations as a person. Taking a step back and looking at the narrative as a whole, you can see why these events needed to happen. The overarching storyline presented a cohesive tale. It's when you get close that the details become muddied and often hand-waved away by the fast-paced nature of the plot. There are plot points that remain unaddressed, as well as frequent discrepancies in travel time, speeds, and distance. Other issues are the infrequent nature of sensor systems, sometimes picking up signals from light years away, other times not detecting a ship right off their bow. But to be fair, that's nothing new to Trek. It's just very noticeable here for some reason. But again, as pointed out though, there is reason for character X to perform action Y. The reason just doesn't reside within the character, but at the whim of the writing and a greater narrative of which the characters obviously remain unaware. It's a shame in a way, but I feel that this may be because the amount of story they had to tell left little room for the smaller details. Occasionally, individual episodes stand out as interesting stories, and from about episode 8 onwards, Discovery has found its footing, and it seems it's creating a gripping series of escalating, engrossing events. It's here that its more dramatic approach, darker tone and character adversity pay off in spades, but I can't go into it too much without talking spoilers, so I won't. Suffice to say, the weaknesses in Discovery's story are muffled by the compelling spectacle unfolding on screen. Speaking of on-screen spectacles, this is a simple one to sum up. The visuals. Discovery looks fantastic. Its style and camera work mark it as completely different in aesthetic to the other Trek series, but provides a good jumping on point for familiarity to fans of the 2009 films. It is easily one of the best looking sci-fi shows I've seen, rivaling things like The Expanse. But as with almost everything in Discovery, it's give and take. Although the space visuals are great, they're rarely used in any other fashion other than to provide panning shots of a stationary USS Discovery, and man do they love their zoom-in shots. The sets are well designed, lavish, if not a little dark at times, and they make convincing starships. The props and sound design too are spot on, and the uniforms are crisp if a little uncomfortable looking. So the elephant in the room is the redesigns themselves. Star Trek Discovery went a great distance to create its own style, to make it identifiable from any other Trek series, and in doing so, it borderline breaks continuity. I'm tired of saying that word by now, but it was the showrunner's choice to set it 10 years before Kirk, and that comes with a set of expectations. Did I want to see the crew navigating around space in tactical turtlenecks, and want the visuals to match what we saw in the 60s episode The Cage? No, not really. I'm sorry, but it does look fairly dated. But I would have liked there to be more in common with the designs than what we got. After all, there's a difference between a complete redesign and a simple reimagining. On the subject of redesigns though, the Klingons to me still look weird. They don't look like Klingons that I know, and people point out that the Klingons have been redesigned before, but then those people also need to acknowledge that there are lore reasons that were then provided to establish the change. Where here, Discovery has yet to do so outside of simply wanting to create its own visuals. Mini rant over, but depending on how much emphasis you place on the lore, this may be a major turning off point for you, as it is for me, but that's my personal opinion. As for the future, well, it has been renewed for a season 2, and my hopes are high. Discovery escalates from a bumpy start to a triumphant finish, despite its hasty plot points and often disregard for character in earlier episodes. Personally, I feel that the setting was the wrong one for the story they wanted to tell. A post-Nemesis or Voyager series would have functioned equally well and freed them from the confines of continuity. But despite this, it was certainly something to behold. The visuals and the care taken with the design shows. Whether you agree with the new look or not, it's hard to deny the effort on display here. The point I simply try to make is that you can respect the canon as well as tell a new story, and in Season 2 it hints that this may be the approach the show's taking, now that the initial plot is all wrapped up. Perhaps with more time, a longer run, might benefit the series, allowing for greater diversity in its character roster. And if not, then perhaps formulating a storyline that is tailored for a shorter series from the get-go would minimise plot holes and details. Overall, Discovery is worth watching. Yes, if you can do so without too much effort. If you're a Trek fan, I can completely understand and often share your frustration with certain choices made, but I would encourage you to check it out regardless. Perhaps with a level of disconnectedness. Consider it a reimagining of established events. If you don't mind the redesigns and just want a good story, it's best to watch the show now, as it's only after viewing the series in its entirety that a lot of questions and actions become apparent from a narrative standpoint, if not in the finer details. The ride is fun, the visuals are spectacular, and if you want to simply enjoy a rich feast for the eyes, then this series easily provides. And if you are completely new to Trek altogether or have only seen the 2009 films, then this is the series for you. I can understand your trepidation to jump into Star Trek, but be assured this series has you squarely in mind. Designed from the ground up to pull in a new audience, and it might even encourage you to check out some of the Trek lineage, though that's not a requirement. With all that wrapped up, I did enjoy Discovery, despite its issues, and as often pointed out, every iteration of Star Trek has never made it out of space dock without some subspace turbulence. After all, it's an iconic series, like Star Wars, and look at the split opinions on The Last Jedi. Thanks for listening to my review of Discovery Season 1. If you're new to my channel, I hope you'll stop in from time to time to see what I've been up to, and if not, thanks for watching anyway. You peeps are the reason I hurry home from work every day. Oh god, I need a life. Until next time, I've been Rick, thanks for watching, and goodbye.